Nice try, Sanchez.
Hello everybody and welcome to the MultiVersus Iceberg Explained. So this video was initially inspired by a Reddit post that I saw from user Mr. Super Guy Man, who made his own version of a MultiVersus Iceberg. And despite the fact that MultiVersus the game is still very early on in its lifespan, I really enjoyed the iceberg chart and I figured, you know what, I'll make a video about it. It's worth noting that the chart that I'll be referencing in my video will not be the exact chart that he used in his Reddit post, and that's because I wanted to change what entries were in what tiers, as well as add a few entries of my own. And so I made my own version of it, but it's heavily inspired off of his iceberg chart. So if you want to see the original, I'll have the link to the original post in the description below. If you're unfamiliar with an iceberg chart, it's based off the phrase tip of the iceberg, which is always used to talk about when something is just surface level information, but there's a lot more information the deeper you go into the rabbit hole. And so the way this will work is that we'll start with the very surface level information that if you're at all very familiar with the MultiVersus community, you'll probably know about. And then as we go farther and farther down, we'll go to more and more obscure information about the MultiVersus game. And with all that said, I think we're ready to jump into the video, but as always, thank you for watching. Starting off with Tier 1 has a lot of information that is pretty obvious, and you kind of have to live under a rock in the MultiVersus community to not know about. Tony Huynh. This entry is in reference to Tony, who is the co-founder and game director of Player First Games, the company that makes MultiVersus. Tony has become a bit of a meme in the MultiVersus community just because he's essentially taken on the same role as Masahiro Sakurai has in the Smash community, in that whenever people are talking about the decisions behind the game MultiVersus, instead of referencing the entire team that is the Player First Games that is making the game, they usually attribute it all to Tony. Tony is also the most common face that we see in trailers for MultiVersus, and he's also very active on Twitter, and so that's also led to how infamous he is in the MultiVersus community. Player First Games. I kind of got into this already, but Player First Games is the team that's working on MultiVersus. Initial leaks for MultiVersus stated that the developer was going to be NetherRealm Studios, but that ended up not being true. And honestly, I'm happy it wasn't true because I think what Player First Games has done already has been well above my expectations, and I wouldn't want anything to change. Raindog. Most of the MultiVersus roster is made up of IPs that Warner Brothers owns. However, Raindog is an original character, and so he's kind of different from the rest of the roster in that sense. Player First Games has stated that they're very interested in adding other original characters on top of the various IPs that Warner Brothers owns with that. And so Raindog kind of represents a window into all the possible futures that are possible for this game. Ultra Instinct Shaggy. This is in reference to the fact that the incarnation of Shaggy we see in MultiVersus is very influenced by all the memes that were going around about Shaggy being able to go Ultra Instinct and he's using 1% of his power, that whole meme that was going around a while ago. And it's essentially Warner Brothers' way of having a lot of fun with what Shaggy's moveset could be. Because of that, a lot of people have grown very fond of Shaggy's representation in MultiVersus. Tier 2 contains a lot of information that is very relevant to MultiVersus as a game right now, but will probably age in a way where a lot of people will end up forgetting about a lot of these details. Taz Spin. So Taz's spin has already been nerfed as of recording this video, but for the first week of the open beta, Taz's side special was hilarious. It was essentially a noob stomper where if you weren't super familiar with the game as of yet, which most people playing the open beta weren't, they essentially just got the game in most cases, then Taz Spin was this move that felt very, very oppressive to approach. However, in spite of that, they still decided to nerf it in order for Taz's moveset to be less side special focused and to make it less annoying for the average player. Can I get a code? This was also a bit of a meme. During previous betas, primarily beta 2 and 3, those are both before the current open beta, only a limited amount of people were actually able to get into these betas, and it was essentially a draw of the hat as to whether you would get into the betas or not. However, every person would receive friend invite codes where they could invite 2 or maybe 3 people to play with them. This led to a ton of spam on Discord servers like the MultiVersus Arcade, as well as just the main MultiVersus Discord server, where people would DM you and ask for codes. I myself got into the second and third MultiVersus betas, and so during those betas, I would get a ton of spam in my Discord DMs about people requesting to get a code. And it was annoying. It was kind of a meme at the time, how everyone was clamoring for invite codes. And so that's the context behind this entry. It's going to be something that most people will forget about in the coming months. Garnet's losing animation. So between the third beta and the open beta, Garnet's losing animation changed. The original losing animation was her like going gray and crackling and dying, I think. I don't really understand what it was supposed to be, but it didn't seem like a reference to anything in Steven Universe of what I'm aware, and it seems kind of out of place. And for the open beta, they changed it to her getting frustrated, but then calming herself down and meditating, which is more in line with the character as I understand her. So why the previous animation was there in the first place is kind of weird. It obviously took a lot of animation and modeling work to make. It's just, it was a weird addition, and I think it's appropriate that they changed it, but the fact it was there in the first place is kind of weird. They also changed Raindog's victory animation for the open beta, and let me tell you, that victory animation is adorable. I am very, very happy they changed that. Breaking Bad. Essentially, there's this Twitter account that's called Mr. White for Multiverses, and it's this account that keeps making photoshops of Walter White in the game, as well as making fan movesets, and you just see them in every Twitter thread or Multiverses talking about how Walter White should be in the game. This Twitter account has become pretty infamous in the Multiverses community for just being kind of funny, also kind of annoying at the same time. And so because of that, because of this single Twitter account, Walter White is one of the most discussed characters for Multiverses in the future, which is a little ridiculous. I don't think Walter White's ever going to get into the game, but I would love if he was there, but he's not going to get in the game. Open beta login issues. This was a big issue on the very first day of the open beta launching. I was streaming at the time at twitch.tv/LodarnTom, and people were getting Twitch drops from my stream, but everybody in chat was talking about how they had various issues in trying to get into the game. The biggest one was this issue where they would get the code and actually get into the game, but it would never load because they would get stuck on the screen that said syncing account state. This is the one that Player First Games initially addressed and released a patch for that fixed the issue a few hours after the open beta launched. My chat seemed to imply that there were a lot of other issues on top of that as well, but it's kind of unclear if those were because of mistakes on the part of the people trying to get into the game, or whether it was actually Player First Games themselves. Now we're on the third tier, starting with the Hungrybox leak. This is in reference to a leak that was leaked by Hungrybox before Multiverses was even officially announced. This featured several characters that would later be shown with the announcement of the game, as well as a couple characters that still had not been announced yet. As far as I understand, this was the first leak that ever had real credibility behind it. Themyscira. Themyscira is Wonder Woman's homeland in the DC universe, and Themyscira is what most people thought Trophy's Edge was very early on in the game's life. I was actually the way that most people found out Trophy's Edge was Trophy's Edge, due to the video that I had made about the subject. And so Themyscira is in reference to a piece of misinformation that was present very early on in the game's life. Mature language setting. I actually didn't know this was a thing before I made the iceberg chart. Apparently there's a setting that you can turn on in Multiverses that, when enabled, it allows characters to say bad words, which I think is really funny. I think that's really cool that they added that. Right now, it doesn't matter too much, but I think it's going to be a lot more impactful when Rick and Morty come out, because those characters are definitely going to be cussing a lot. Orange Shirt Steven. So this is in reference to this weird detail that was present in the very first announcement trailer for the game. Essentially, there were clips present where Steven would have his typical red shirt, but then there were a few clips as well where Steven would have an orange shirt on top of that. Why this version of Steven was ever present, I'm unsure. My first instinct was maybe it was sort of an alternate costume, or maybe it had something to do with team colors, because those are also present in Multiverses. However, we haven't seen any skins yet besides this, where it's just the base skin, but it has a different color palette. And there's also no such thing as an orange team in Multiverses, it's just red and blue teams. And so why this was ever featured in the game is very unclear. Now we're on tier 4 with Ninja and Brute. Ninja and Brute are in reference to two original characters that have been found in the game's files. These are completely original characters, just like Raindog is an original character, and they have a lot of work done for them. They have character artwork, full-on models and animations. Like, these characters are pretty far along in their development. It is unclear if these characters are scrapped, or if there are still plans to add them to the full release. The Reddit 3. This is in reference to a leak for MultiVersus that got absolutely everything that it said correctly, except for 3 characters that are still currently unconfirmed. These characters are Johnny Bravo, Mad Max, and Fred Flintstone. Whether there are still plans to add these characters to the game is very unknown. Jimmy Fallon. So this is by far my favorite entry of anything that's on this iceberg. Essentially, on The Tonight Show, they had guest Macy Williams, who is the actress for Arya Stark in Game of Thrones, come on and talk about multiverses, which I think is insane because, for one, it's Jimmy Fallon, and I think Jimmy Fallon's just a funny guy to laugh at. Not laugh with, to clarify, I mean laugh at. But also, like, why go through the effort of doing a Tonight Show airing that advertised multiverses? Like, I don't know, it just seems weird to me. Like, I don't think that the people who watch The Tonight Show are necessarily going to play multiverses. I don't think there's a lot of crossing of communities and audiences there. But hey, you know what? It's a pretty funny interview, so I recommend checking it out. It's kind of funny to me.
Because they just announced this new video game called MultiVersus.
Yes.
And Arya Stark is in it. Yes.
It is.
Iron Giant controversy. So there were a lot of people that were upset about Iron Giant's inclusion in the game because they thought it contradicted the Iron Giant's character arc and story in the movie. And like, they're not wrong, but also I don't care. Like, frankly. I think it's a weird thing to get hung up on. It doesn't really matter. The game isn't canon. It's not like a contradiction of the Iron Giant's character within the movie, which is canon. It's just a fun inclusion, a fun character to include in MultiVersus the game. And so getting upset that doesn't make sense for the Iron Giant to be fighting here, I think is really sweaty, and I think it's stupid. I don't think it's worth getting hung up on. And now we're on the 5th and final tier, starting off with removed perks. This is in reference to the fact that there are several perks that have since been scrapped from previous betas. Perks from the first and second beta I won't touch because those were under NDA. However, there were 2 perks that were removed from the third beta for the open beta. This includes Taz's perk, Right Back At Ya, and Arya's perk, Wounded. I'll leave the descriptions for what these perks actually did on screen. Mobile port. Apparently data miners have found evidence for a mobile port within the game's files. I think the idea of a mobile port is cool. I think it's a fun idea. However, that could very easily be a scrapped idea, so I wouldn't take it as a promise that there will be a mobile port in the future. Voice lines hinting at other characters. Data miners have found a bunch of voice lines for characters in MultiVersus that have not been announced yet. This includes Marvin the Martian from Looney Tunes, as well as Raven the Teen Titan. Additionally, certain characters have voice lines for when they interact with other unannounced characters. For example, there are voice lines of Finn interacting with Joker from Batman. And this is all official voice work that requires money to make, and so I kind of doubt that these characters in particular are going to be scrapped. So I can't make any promises, but chances are those 3 characters will be in MultiVersus very, very soon. And that was the MultiVersus Iceberg Explained. If you found the video interesting, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. It really supports me, and it will let me know that you guys enjoy this kind of content and want more of it. Today's video was supposed to be an update to the canonical tier list, but this time with LeBron, Rick, and Morty. However, that video ended up taking longer than I expected it to, and so I had to postpone it to next week. So if you were hoping for an update to the canonical tier list, stay tuned. I'm working on it. It will be out next Friday. All right, thanks again.